So I've tried to make this video quite a few times, and either it's technical or it's me not doing well or whatever. I just keep messing it up. So hopefully this time will work. Hey guys, it is Brooke from Grieving Mommy, and it has been a hot second since I have been here to talk to y'all. So I thought I would pop in as promised and do kind of an update video, tell you where I've been, what's going on, and kind of what you can expect from the channel moving forward.
What's been going on? What have you been doing?
So there has been a lot that's happened. Okay, so if you don't know me and if you're new to the channel, hello and welcome. And I'm sorry that you're here because typically people that arrive here are experiencing some sort of grief or want to help someone who is grieving. My personal story is that I lost my daughter, Libby, in a car accident, and she was 10 years old. And it's been a little less than a year and a half since she died. But I am unfortunately no stranger to grief because previous to that, I had lost my sister, my dad, my stepmom, my sister-in-law, and then I lost my daughter. And one of the reasons that I have not been here is because now I've also lost my mom. All of these experiences with grief just, I mean, aside from being devastating, they just sort of spurned me to kind of share my experiences with people so that people didn't feel alone. And it also kind of led me to study and learn about grief. And I've gone on to become a certified grief educator. And I just, hope to help people with sharing information about my life and what I'm dealing with and how I'm getting through things. And then also talking about, specific topics that deal with grief. So that was a long way of saying welcome if you are new. If you've been here for a while, hello. Thank you for hanging with me during the break, or thank you for coming back. I really appreciate it. And yeah, so let's get started.
Let's get started.
All right, so where have I been? So if you've been following my channel, you know that my mom had pancreatic cancer. She was diagnosed right before Libby died, and a lot of the time while I was grieving with Libby, I was also helping my mom with, go through her cancer treatments and supporting her in that. So it's kind of a double whammy there. She had surgery in this past January to remove her tumor. And the surgery went well, but the recovery did not go so well. And long story short, she bounced around from the hospital to a rehabilitation hospital, back to our local hospital, and then she ended up in hospice. And she passed away on April 4th. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through, honestly. So it's kind of a whole different world because I had been experienced, in unexpected grief and kind of traumatic and catastrophic kind of changes. But my mom, kind of going through that firsthand with her and watching that decline, that was really hard, that anticipatory grief that I experienced with her. And also it was the first time for me personally that I've had to make, big decisions about her life. And that it was a struggle, especially while I was still grieving about Libs. My brothers and I got to the point where, she was in our local hospital and they said she couldn't really stay there anymore. She wasn't doing what she needed to do to recover. And they suggested, perhaps it's time to consider hospice. And my mom did not want to go. She knew that was a death sentence because she was on a feeding tube. She couldn't eat anything. And if she went to hospice, you can't have a feeding tube. So she knew she'd basically starve to death. But there was really nothing else for her to do other than just lay in the hospital and get worse. And we had no idea how long that would be. And they were trying to find somewhere else for her to go. So my brothers and I made the decision that we thought that the hospice setting would be best for her. And, eventually she agreed, even though she was upset with it. And she went there. The people at hospice were amazing. But again, not to drag out that story. If you guys want to hear the story of what happened, I'm happy to share it. You can let me know in the comments if you're interested. But She was coherent when she went into hospice, and she was there for about a week and a half with no food, no water, nothing. You know, the body can live a long time. You think it can't, but when you're that kind of sick and frail and not moving, I guess the body doesn't need that much. So eventually she got to the point where she was just sleeping and she wouldn't wake up. And then the day that she died, they had told us that it wasn't going to be long. So my brothers that lived near me, we were there. So I was there with two of my brothers, and we got to spend those last moments with her, which was good. My brother had actually ordered a pizza. It's kind of a weird story, but I'll throw it in here in case you're interested. So I'd been sitting by her bed kind of watching her breathing, because she would stop every now and then, and we'd be kind of waiting like, is she going to start again? And then she'd, and she'd take breaths again and keep going. And we were getting kind of, we were kind of used to that. So I was sitting and watching her breathing. My brother ordered the pizza. I got up to get a slice of pizza and walked over to the pizza box, came back. I was standing over my mom with a slice of pizza, like ready to take a bite. And I looked down and it didn't look like she was breathing, and I was waiting and waiting. And I'm like, okay, Mom, take a breath. And she didn't take a breath. And I just looked up on my brothers and I'm like, guys, I don't think she's breathing. And in that time, it's crazy. In the time it took me to get up and get a slice of pizza and walk back, she died. So yeah, that is reason one why I had to take some time there to myself. And also my brother and I are co-executors of her will. And there's so much that goes on with that. It's one of the things about grief, like when someone dies, it's not just them dying that you have to deal with, it's dealing with all of the other shit that goes with it.
I just have so much paperwork to do.
With Libs, it's one thing because she's 10 years old and there's not that much paperwork and all that kind of stuff. But with my mom, we have to go through the will and probate and calling people and lawyers and all this stuff. And it's just like, you don't feel like doing any of it, but you kind of don't have a choice. So I've been dealing with all that. So that's the first thing. So number two, the second thing was my son, Grayson. So if you're new, I have a 20-year-old son, Max, and an 18-year-old son, Grayson. Max graduated from college and he got a job in an engineering department. It was like all kind of set. Grayson graduated from high school, and that was one of those like happy that he made it through. He is so smart and he hated school. So it was like a nail biter, like will he or won't he? So that was a lot of stress too. Then the bigger part of that was the fact that they were both graduating and both of them were not going to be living with me. Grayson, when I asked him, said, he was going to find somewhere to live. He's at the point where he doesn't want anything to do with parents. He just wants to go experience the world. And I just started looking around my house because, they're out with friends and working and whatever. And it was just me. And I was in this big 5-bedroom house on a half acre of land in a nice neighborhood. And I was by myself most of the time. And it was weird. I'd just look around like, what the hell? Like, where is everyone? Like, what happened? I bought that house. At the time I was married, I had a stepson, and then my 3 kids. There were 6 people living in this 5-bedroom house, and it made sense. And I thought it was my forever home. I freaking loved my house. I loved it. And then it just became too much. Like I just started getting really upset. Like I don't think I can do this by myself. And I made the decision to sell the house. Again, not lightly, because I loved that house, but I was taking care of it by myself, and trying to pay for it by myself. And my son Max was contributing a little bit, but if you've ever had a mortgage, it was nice of him to help, but it wasn't really making much of a dent. So I was really struggling financially. And again, so a couple months of a story, relatively short, I was like, where am I going to go by myself? So I decided to buy a tiny house, and it's a legitimate, I'm in it now. I'll show you pictures. So I am in a legitimate tiny house. There is a tiny house neighborhood. It's about 25 minutes from where I work. And I'd always watched, like I love Tiny House Nation. I've always watched tiny house shows and I've always thought it was really cool, but it was always like, you know, I'm married with kids. There's no way I'm shoving that many people into a tiny house. And then when it was just me, it was like, okay, why the hell not, I guess. Like, I don't know. There's just been something in me in the past couple months where I've been really needing that refresh, you know, hitting the reset button. It was really hard getting to that point. Selling the house was awful. Because it's where Libby lived. And I had to go through, you know, first cleaning up her room and then packing up all of her stuff. And I honestly couldn't do it. I got to the point where everything was just shoved in boxes and it's being stored at her dad's house because I couldn't. I just sobbed. It's like ripping your heart out. And just knowing that I wasn't going to be at the place where she lived and where I had all those memories. And it's kind of that double-edged sword. I feel like I'm rambling, I'm sorry, but it's that double-edged sword of like, it was hard living there because I saw her everywhere. I mean, she was in every nook and cranny of that house. And it didn't matter where I was, it was just a reminder everywhere. And part of me kind of wanted to get away from that. But then the other part of me was devastated about losing that. And it was really, really difficult. So it took me longer to come back. Originally, I took my break thinking it was just going to be to help my mom. And then it was the difficulty of this life shift that I have going on, that I've just been struggling with, honestly. So yeah, I bought my house and I've been here for a couple weeks now. And I actually really, really like the tiny house. If you guys want to hear about that, I don't know what people want to hear about. So this is a grief channel typically. So I don't know if you want to hear about, you know, tiny house stuff or, you know, starting over or whatever. But I really, really like the tiny house. But I will tell you, it is a huge adjustment. It's, and I'm sure I'll talk about it on this channel because it, you know, I'm going from living with a huge family of people and living with other people my entire life to the first time in my mid-40s living alone. It's a weird shift.
Where did everybody go?
And the other thing that I'm struggling with is guilt, because sometimes I really like living alone. You know, I've never done it. I have no idea who in the hell I am. That's part of the journey that I'm on. This part of my grief journey is figuring out how to keep going and how to figure out who Brooke is, without being a full-time mom and wife, and taking care of a house, because it takes me about 5 minutes to vacuum my tiny house and it's just me living here, so it doesn't get really messy. And it's a whole different world for me right now. And there are times when I am sobbing here because it's lonely and it's so different and I'm sad and I miss my kids. And then there are other times when it's like, this is awesome. I'm not cleaning up messes all the time and I'm not constantly putting, you know, dirty dishes into the dishwasher, and I can watch whatever the hell I want on TV and I can basically do whatever I want and no one cares. There's no one here to, like, you know, to worry about but me. And there's times that that's really nice. And then when I start having those feelings, it is like a punch in the gut. Like, I feel so guilty because none of this would be happening if Libby weren't here. So I feel guilty about being excited about being on my own for the first time, if that makes sense. So just lots of conflicting feelings right now. Yeah, and it's just one of those things I think people need to talk about, because I think in grief, you not only lose your people, you lose your sense of who you are in the world. And in my case, it just happens to be like exponentially worse because of the amount of people that I've lost in such a short amount of time and the amount of life changes that I've had. You know, if you've lost someone and you still have little kids, you still have to be, a mom or a dad for those little kids. But for me, Libby was my little kid. And now that the other ones are grown, it's like I'm thrust into this whole new identity. And it is what it is. And I've got to figure it out. And it's definitely a struggle. But that's where I am. So, okay. Hopefully that wasn't too depressing. You know, it's depressing, but it's also, it's exciting, I guess, figuring out what your life is going to be. And if you guys are interested, this is something that I really enjoy doing. So if you want to hear more from me, I would actually love to hear more from you. I would love to hear in the comments, what kind of stuff do you want to hear about from me? Do you like these vlog style videos where I'm talking to you, or do you like more of like the researched videos where I share grief topics? I'm probably going to do kind of a little mix of both here. But if there's anything specific that you'd like to see or hear about, or topics that you'd like me to cover, I would love for you to drop that in the comments so that I can be of the most help to people right now. And thank you to everyone who is just, been so wonderful telling me how much they appreciate that I'm just sharing what I'm going through. Because I think it's so important just to get it out there and normalize grief and normalize these feelings, whether they're good or bad feelings or confusing as shit, which is what they are right now. So, all right. So let me know what you think. If you want to hear about the tiny house, I can talk about that. If you want to hear about all of my, midlife crisis, things that I'm doing to try to keep myself sane, I can talk about those things. So I would love to hear from you. And that is all for now, because I don't want to make this too long. I will catch you guys again later. I'm planning on posting more regularly at this point now that things have settled down a little bit. And yeah. All right. I'll catch you later. Sending love and hugs as always.